Time's are ticking. Better get this book tag done. Hello, I'm Tim and I have too many books. This is going to be the Around the Clock book tag. This tag was created by Coiny Reads and it's relatively simple rules. Books that have the numbers between 1 and 12 on their covers, and they should preferably be books that you own, but they can be books that you've read. The only other rule is you can't really use combinations of numbers, so 10,000 does not count as 10. It's 10,000. 11 does not count as 1 twice. That sort of thing. The first book is The Loved One by Evelyn Waugh from 1948. This book is inspired by a trip that Evelyn Waugh took to Hollywood in 1947 when there were plans afoot by MGM to make a film of his novel Brideshead Revisited. According to my reading, it seems that Evelyn Waugh wasn't all that keen on having his book adapted for film, but was quite happy to take the money from the Hollywood producers. During his time in Hollywood, he met people like Walt Disney and Charlie Chaplin, and he also became rather interested in the American funeral business. He even acquired a copy of the history of the famous Forest Lawns Cemetery, and his copy is now fairly well annotated. The plot of the book is that a British poet and aspiring screenwriter called Dennis Barlow is trying to make it in Hollywood. He's somewhat looked down upon by the British community in Hollywood because, needing cash, he has begun to work in a pet cemetery. He gets a small opportunity of salvation when a leading light of the British community dies, and he helps to arrange the man's funeral. Visiting the human cemetery of Forest Glades, he encounters the rather strange Mr. Joyboys and the beautiful Amy Thanatogenous. Incidentally, Thanatogenous is Greek for born of death. Dennis falls for Amy Thanatogenous, and things go awry from there. It is, like a lot of Evelyn Waugh, rather dark and rather satirical, especially about the American funeral industry. People have noticed that some American humorists such as S.J. Perelman had already investigated the American funeral business some years before, and he may have been picking up vibes from them. One interesting side note here is that Evelyn Waugh was a friend of the Mitford sisters, especially of Nancy Mitford, and Nancy's somewhat estranged and communist sister Jessica went to live in America and wrote in 1963 a book called The American Way of Death, which treats on a similar subject to The Loved One. The next book is Two People by A A Milne from 1931. This is sometimes claimed to be A A Milne's first adult full-length novel. This isn't entirely true. He wrote the Red House Mystery, which was a mystery story in the early 1920s, and he also novelised a number of his plays. But it is certainly his first adult book since he had found fame with his Winnie the Pooh stories, published in the mid-1920s. In this book, Reginald Wellard, a somewhat unsuccessful novelist, has a sudden success with one of his novels, and it allows him to sort of live the life of the great writer. This causes a certain amount of friction with his wife Sylvia. Some people have seen this as a commentary by A A Milne on his marriage with his wife Daphne. The next book on the list is Three Men on a Bummel by Jerome K. Jerome. We are once more back with the three men that featured famously in Three Men in a Boat, although unfortunately we don't have the dog Montmorency. This time they are off on their travels through Germany on a cycling holiday. The Bummel of the title is actually a German word meaning stroll, although the author in the book claims that it kind of means wandering about with no clear destination. This book contains a lot of humorous English stereotypes about the Germans, although these are probably not the same as the stereotypes we have of the Germans today. After all, we've had a couple of world wars that have shaped our opinions of the Germans. At this time in 1900, people have kind of mixed feelings about Germany. They admire its success, its cleanliness, its seeming efficiency, and the ingenuity of its people. They are, after all, the leaders of science and engineering in Europe at the time. However, this does mean that there is a slight worry that they might one day overhaul Britain and the Empire. Germany is out for its place in the sun, an empire of its own, and eyes the Royal Navy jealously. There is a growing paranoia about what the German Empire might do. To a certain extent, we can see this paranoia play out in 1903 when Erskine Childers publishes The Riddle of the Sands. Our number 4 book is Life is a Four-Letter Word by Nicholas Monsarrat. This is Nicholas Monsarrat's 2-volume autobiography, and I have to say, Life is a Four-Letter Word is a pretty good name for an autobiography. Nicholas Monsarrat is particularly known for his sea stories, especially set during World War II, and his most famous book is probably The Cruel Sea, which details some of the experiences that Nicholas Monsarrat had as a Royal Navy Volunteer Reserves officer in World War II. I have to say, I'm reading my way through Nicholas Monsarrat. I'm having quite a good time of it. Most recently I read Esther Costello, which is about a deaf, dumb and blind girl who has nothing to do with pinball. Nicholas Monsarrat was born in 1910, was educated at Trinity College, Cambridge. He considered going into the law but decided in the end to switch towards journalism. During the 1930s he wrote 4 novels and had a number of plays put on, but it tends to be his books set during the war which are his best known pieces, although his later career as a diplomat does feed into some of his later stories. Book number 5 is Fifth Planet by Fred and Geoffrey Hoyle. Fred Hoyle was a leading British astronomer who devised the theory of stellar nuclear synthesis, which is, I believe, the idea about how heavier elements get formed in stars that start out as helium and hydrogen. He was, though, a little bit controversial. He opposed the Big Bang theory of the universe, preferring instead a steady state theory, and he also proposed the idea of panspermia, where microscopic bacterial cells hitch rides on asteroids and seed the universe with life. It is also said that the only reason he didn't get a Nobel Prize for physics was that he pissed everybody off. In this story, written in 1963 but set in the 1970s, we have the idea of a star passing close to the solar system, close enough that it is feasible to mount an expedition to examine the solar system. And although 4 of the planets are gas giants, the 5th planet appears to be full of chlorophyll-bearing life and could possibly be a second Earth of some description. As in the book, we're still in the throes of the Cold War. Both an American and a Soviet expedition is launched. Book number 6 is The Sixth Lamentation by William Brodrick. William Brodrick practiced law as a barrister for 10 years before turning to full-time writing and going to live in Normandy. This book is the first of his Father Anselm stories. He won a Crime Writers Association Golden Dagger for his 3rd Father Anselm book in 2009. In this book, Father Anselm lives at a priory as a monk, and into his priory comes a suspected Nazi war criminal. This book is set in about 1995. At the same time, a young woman is discovering the story of her grandmother who may have been affected by the behaviour of this same suspected Nazi war criminal. Father Anselm has to investigate to find out the truth. Book number 7 is The 7% Solution by Nicholas Meyer from 1974. This book is a pastiche of the Sherlock Holmes novels, and much like the Flashman novels, the author pretends that he is merely editing the secret memoirs of a certain Dr. John D. Watson. He's written 4 other of these pastiche Sherlock Holmes novels in 1976, 1993, 2019 and 2021. The gaps in between writing these Sherlock Holmes pastiches can be explained by the fact that he writes and directs movies, including a certain movie called Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. The plot of the book concerns the increasing problems that Sherlock Holmes has as a habitual drug user, the 7% solution of cocaine that is occasionally mentioned in the books. The story takes place in and around the events of the final problem, where in Conan Doyle's original, Sherlock Holmes takes a tumble from the Reichenbach Falls. In the story, Sherlock Holmes's drug problem has become so severe that it looks like the character of Moriarty is in fact a figment of his deranged imagination. So Dr. Watson and Mycroft Holmes arranged to have Sherlock sent to Vienna to consult with a certain Dr. Sigmund Freud. This book was made into a film in 1976, starring Nicole Williamson as Sherlock Holmes, Robert Duvall as Dr. Watson, and Alan Arkin as Sigmund Freud. Book number 8 is When 8 Bells Toll by Alistair MacLean. Alistair MacLean was a Scottish writer who started out as a journalist before switching to writing adventure thrillers. He was, in his time, extremely successful. Between 1961 and 1979, 15 of his books were made into movies, and some of them were major hits. 8 Bells Toll was his first novel after about a 3-year hiatus. The narrator, Philip Calvert, is a secret agent who is sent to investigate the piracy of a number of ships carrying bullion that have gone missing in the Irish Sea. He ends up investigating a mysterious yacht and an even more mysterious castle on the west coast of Scotland. The book was turned into a movie starring Anthony Hopkins as Philip Calvert, and I can't help feeling that this was intended to launch Anthony Hopkins as a major action film star, which is not necessarily what we associate Anthony Hopkins with. Book number 9 is Gideon the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir from 2019. Tamsyn Muir is a New Zealand author, and this is the first book in her Locked Tomb series, which is now at 3 books and is shortly to become a 4th. We are in the star system of Dominicus, ruled over by a cruel and callous emperor. Each of the 9 habitable planets in this solar system have a great house, a great family, that practice a different kind of necromancy. The emperor summons representatives of each great family to a deserted house where they will intrigue against each other until one of them wins and gets the right to be a lictor, one of the emperor's special necromancers. Somewhat amusingly, this series has been called Lesbian Necromancers in Space, and Gideon the Ninth is really rather good fun. I may be cheating a little with book 10. It is 10 minutes and 38 seconds in this strange world by Elif Shafak from 2019. A sex worker is left for dead in a dumpster just outside Istanbul. As her last 10 minutes or so of life tick by, she remembers all the things that have brought her here. She also remembers many of her friends, not knowing that they have been deeply touched by their association with her and are desperately trying to find her. Now, of course, the presence of other numbers on the cover of this book might disqualify it in the eyes of some people, but it is a really good book and has introduced me to Elif Shafak, and I will be reading much more of her work. Book number 11 is by author and snail fancier Patricia Highsmith. It is 11 from 1970. This is a collection of 11 short stories, including The Snail Watcher, which is the name the book went by in some territories. Patricia Highsmith is probably best known for books like Strangers on a Train and also for her Ripley novels, starting with The Talented Mr. Ripley. Recently I've been reading my way through Patricia Highsmith's Ripley novels, and I've got to about number 3. This is inspired by the recent television series based on The Talented Mr. Ripley. I have to say I'm a little bit stalled with Patricia Highsmith after book number 3. One of the things I like about Patricia Highsmith is her ability to inhabit the mind of some deeply, deeply disturbed people. But she is so effective at that occasionally I want to throw the book across the room and run away and hide for a long time after I've read some of it. She is very good, but perhaps in small doses. So perhaps my video on her Ripley novels might have to wait a little. Book number 12 is The 12 Caesars by Suetonius. After all, as a man, I am duty-bound to think about the Roman Empire. Some people may quibble about this book being about the first 12 emperors of Rome. Julius Caesar wasn't an emperor, but it does go from Julius Caesar to the Emperor Domitian. Suetonius started writing this in AD 121. At the time, he had full access to the imperial and the Senate archives, and was able to paint a fairly accurate picture of the time, although it has been said that he rather goes in for scandal and gossip rather than strict history, and sometimes misses bits out. It is said that later on he was forbidden access to the Imperial Archives, so he had to rely on somewhat unreliable sources. Yeah, so that's my pick of 12 books for the Around the Clock tag. I hope lots of other people do this tag. If you are interested in picking another 12 books for an odd reason, you could always try my own simple Chinese Zodiac tag, where you just have to match a book with one of the animals and creatures from the Chinese Zodiac. Have fun, and goodbye.